So when we are in our practice, strive to be still, strive to be neutral, strive to be in a state where the entire practice moves through you, right? Not a state where you are telling people what you experience, where you are, explaining to them how you opened this and balanced that and pulled this out of them and drained and balanced their chakras and channeled an animal and gave that information to them. And this is where I think all of these practices miss the mark, is that we have to flow with every single aspect of that practice. We need to move with every single aspect of the experience of that practice. So when we're working on the person, we need to let go. When we are acknowledging the item or the experience in mindfulness, we need to let go of even the thing that we are becoming aware of. If we don't do that, then we're still attaching. So we're not being fully mindful. We're not being fully present for the practice of Reiki, right? In that same regard. See, there's this idea of the dependent nature of all things in the universe. So, and this might be a little bit of a complex topic, so I really want to break it down here in this video. This idea of the dependent arising in all things is very, very important. And it is the crux of this video. It's the reason why these practices, if we don't recognize this one key point, it's why these practices are limiting, and it's why we will always stay attached. We can't be practicing mindfulness-based stress reduction or a mindfulness practice in general. We can't be practicing Reiki. We can't be practicing meditation fully unless we recognize the dependent nature of all things. And so what does that mean? That means that when you are, let's go back to the example for mindfulness. It means that when you are really driving your attention into the thing that you're becoming aware of. So let's say a raisin. I'm using a raisin because we used to use this one all the time. We used to hold the raisin, feel the raisin, smell the raisin, listen to the raisin, put it in our mouth and taste it for 5 or 6 minutes. But see, what we're doing here is we're creating a causal relationship, a relationship that admits to and accepts the duality or the belief of duality of all things. So it is if we are saying there is me and the raisin and nothing else. We have to recognize at some point that we are the raisin as well. There's no separation between any of these things, right? And here's why. Because when we are tasting the raisin, very deeply tasting the raisin, or very sincerely looking at it and becoming aware of its entire texture, well, what is becoming aware of that texture? Okay, one might say that our eyes are taking in the information, our brain is interpreting that information, and we are analyzing it into a narrative that is the raisin, right? Of course. However, what are all those things? My body is made up of an amalgamation of the elements of the universe, and it is kept alive by the energy that flows through the universe. And further, it's kept alive by the food that I've eaten, or by the air that I'm breathing, or by all of the iterations of things that have gone into those to even exist. That is the same as the plant, because the plant is also then deriving its energy from the ground. So the oxygen and the plant and the ground and the microbes in the ground and everything together is all coming together at one point, just so I can simply witness this raisin, right? So I hope you can see what I'm saying here. If we don't let go of this entire idea of the raisin and take it one step further to witness that we are all things arising at once, well, then here we miss the point, right? We can't do that if we're not in silence. And we can't do that if we are not willing to see beyond the duality of this practice. It's the same thing in Reiki. So when we are scanning the bluesan of an individual, or when we're working on ourselves, we'll definitely feel the turbulence and the frustrations and the attachments and the traumas and whatever it might be that we're trying to let go of. That's normal, right? And all of this is like 99% of the journey that we're always on, by the way. I want to make that very clear. Like, it's not because that I'm making this video and that my practice hopefully is centered around this understanding of dependent arising, that I'm just sitting down and I'm in the recognition of dependent arising. That's not how it works. As we go through our practice, we are going to be met with a whole litany of attachments, a whole experience of things that we want to attach to, and stories, and all of these things we are trying to hold on to and witness, experience, interpret, understand, whatever it may be, right? If we stay there, then it's like running an entire marathon and not crossing the finish line. We want to cross the finish line, right? So to be fully present in a Reiki session, this means that we have to recognize the dependent arising, or the dependency of all things. It means that we have to recognize no separation between the person on the table and myself. We have to recognize that the thing we think that we can feel in somebody else is actually a part of us. And the thing that we feel in ourselves is actually a part of the person on the table. If we can recognize this one thing in our practice, then we unlock an entire universe of stillness and depth to the practice that so many people miss, right? This is the key here. Most people are taking a Reiki practice from the idea that they can place their hands, and in that experience, they can channel something, they can download something, they can, get information from spirit animals and guides and all these types of things. And that's very, very real. But again, go back to this idea of the dependent arising. Who is the spirit guide? Who is the, kind of the archangel or the deity that you are channeling, quote unquote? That's you, right? You are all of those things together because they are all part of the universal energy. They are all part of the practice of, from a Reiki perspective anyways, they are all Daikomyo. And so, see, if we start to recognize that all of these things are the same thing, then we're left with literally just one choice in our practice. We remain in the camp of attachment, or at some point, we supersede the camp of attachment and we let go, okay? Strive to let go. Regardless of what camp you're in, strive to let go. Strive to recognize and understand the dependent nature of all things. If you're practicing a walking meditation, for instance, then you might ask yourself, what are you walking on? The immediate response would be, well, I'm walking on the ground, of course. But it's not the ground, right? Because what does the ground mean? Oh, well, we might say it means the earth. What does that mean? Well, it's the planet we live on, okay? But what does that mean? What is the earth? The earth used to be the byproducts of a disk that was spinning in space that created our entire solar system. So what was it before that, right? And is it still not those things? I'm standing on the ground right now. This ground used to be in space. It used to be part of a it used to be part of a planetary disk that was spinning around and created our solar system. So am I not also standing on that disk, right? See, it just keeps going and going and going. And I love this thought experiment with dependent arising because it never ends. And because it never ends, it also goes forward to an infinite degree. Like, it's very easy for us to think about it going backwards, but it's maybe a little bit more difficult for us to see it moving forward. And this is a really important point in this idea of the limitation of our practice. See, I'm here right now, and I'm standing on the earth, and I'm breathing the air, and, I'm feeling the water that's in the air and the temperature around me and so on. But I am all those things. For instance, what will happen to my body when I die? Will it not become the earth? Will it not become the temperature in the air? Will it not become part of the gases of this atmosphere? Of course it will. So that means the atmosphere and I are the same thing. And not only does it mean that, but it also means that I am already dead and I am already in the atmosphere. I am already in the earth because there's literally no end to this cycle. We exist right now in this moment, part and parcel, because everything else in the entire universe exists right now in this moment. And if we didn't exist in this moment, then still everything else would exist and continue on. And we have to think about this idea of, what does it mean that I don't exist? Well, what am I? See, I is the ego. I is the belief of the self. So when we practice something like mindfulness and we focus on a raisin, it's me observing it, me tasting it, me understanding it. This is a transactional relationship here. So many people get this wrong in regards to these practices, right? With Reiki, again, I'm the Reiki practitioner, so I'm going to heal you, right? I'm going to do this to you. I learned Reiki, so I'm going to give you something you don't know. None of that makes any sense, because the only way that I can be present for one of my clients or my students in my classes is to recognize that they are me as well, right? They are turning up for my class just like I'm turning up for their class. It's the same exact thing. So we have to step away from this understanding, or this belief mechanism anyways, rather, of separation in the practice. If you experience a deity, fantastic, experience it. Get the information from it, but recognize that that is simply you already. You know, this is a very common tenet in Buddhism. It's talked about quite often that you are already enlightened, you are already the Buddha. And I really love that tenet because it really drives home this idea. There is no separation, right? So why am I making this video here at the Grand Chartreuse Monastery here in France? Well, first off, it's beautiful. I mean, look at it. It's incredible. I don't know if you're going to be able to see on the video, but just here, you can probably see the bell tower that is illuminated with the sun, right? Just in front of that, there's smoke coming up, okay? Now, today, there's not as many monks here as there used to be. There's maybe a population of 30 to 40 monks here at this monastery at any given moment in present day. There used to be hundreds and hundreds of people here. It's a huge ground. The reason I'm pointing out that area with the smoke is because that's where the monks are, right? And they are engaging nonstop in this practice of the dependent arising of all things. Their day is kept in silence and in contemplative meditation towards God, right? So it's constantly reading scripture, it's constantly praying and meditating and letting go of the attachments of this world to surrender in to the totality of the world. To me, it's very beautiful and very humbling that this happens. And, you know, one of the things that always makes me smile to see a statue of a seated Buddha, or to understand that there's people just behind me here, always in the practice. Because wherever I go, if I'm having a difficult day, if I'm having a busy day, if I'm tired, you know, if my practice is not going very well or whatever it might be, why I'm saying it makes me smile is because I take a moment and think about the monks who are here at the monastery, who are always in the practice. Or I take a moment to think about a very beautiful statue of a seated Buddha, right? And why do I think about that? Well, if we go back to this idea of the dependent nature of all things, then that means that I am also there, right? It means that I'm sitting on the other side of that fence in the practice. It also means that I'm the seated Buddha that's been carved out of rock in, you know, whatever country I might be thinking about it, in Hong Kong maybe, or Thailand, or wherever it may be. We are always in the practice because we're always a part of everything, right? So if we can recognize that, well then, why do we suffer? Where is the space for suffering and for frustration and resentment and pain and anger, right? Because we are always part of the movement of energy through all things. We have to get out of the way of that movement, and when we do, then the resistance, which is framed by our mind, goes away. We turn into the natural state of all things, which is Daikomyo, which is Seihiki, which is Honjaze Shone, which is Chokure, which is the 5 guiding precepts of Reiki. Koyodake wa ikaruna, shinpai suna, kanshashite, gyo hagime, hito ni shinsetsu ni, right? Notice those precepts are talking about the dependent nature of all things. The first 2 precepts are just for today I will not anger, just for today I will not worry. So it's essentially saying, just for today, I will strive to remember the dependent nature and the dependent arising of all things. Or rather, to put it more simply, just for today, I will try my best to not forget that I am also in that monastery meditating. I will try my best to not forget that I am part and parcel of everything in the universe. The only thing that separates us from that understanding is anger and worry. So if we start with those two precepts, well then what do we have left? If we recognize that we are trying to move away, and we do move away from anger, and we do move away from worry, then what are we left with? Gratitude and love and honesty, right? We're left with the natural state of the universe, which is Daikomyo, which is all of these things together. So when we are in our practice, strive to be still, strive to be neutral, strive to be in a state where the entire practice moves through you, right? Not a state where you are telling people what you experience, where you are, explaining to them how you opened this and balanced that and pulled this out of them and drained and balanced their chakras and channeled an animal and gave that information to them. See, because really what you're saying here is I'm still stuck in the belief. I'm still holding on to the belief of the practice. And we might do that for the majority of our practice. That's normal. But what I would encourage everyone to do here is to always keep your eyes on the dependent nature of all things. Always keep that as the finish line. Always strive to move towards that, right? So then, when you feel something, when you believe that you've balanced something and so on, it'll simply pass through you without attachment. That's what we want, right? If we talk about it and we bring it back into the practice, if we think we're channeling and we give that information to other people or whatever it may be, then we're still attaching and we're not recognizing the dependent nature of all things, right? I give this to you. That's duality. I channel this and give it to you. Duality. From duality resides all of our suffering. Let go of the duality. Come into the dependent nature, the dependent arising of all things. Be like the monks just in the monastery here. Be quiet in your practice, right? Seek stillness in your practice. And there, in that space, the entire universe will unlock and bow at your feet. All right, everybody. Thank you so much from this beautiful setting here at the Grand Chartreuse Monastery, just outside Grenoble, France. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's beneficial to your practice, and thank you so much for your support of the channel. If you have any questions on this video, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to answer them as soon as I can. Be well, everybody, and In Gassho to all.